It was a cold and cloudy morning. The train station was filled with people rushing to their destinations, students with backpacks, business people holding coffee cups, tired parents with children, and even some tourists dragging their luggage behind them. Everyone seemed busy, lost in their own world. Announcements echoed across the station, and the noise of footsteps filled the air. In one corner of the wide hall sat a dusty old public piano. It had been there for years, placed as part of a city art project, but now it looked forgotten. No one paid attention to it anymore. People were too busy to care. Then, without anyone noticing at first, a man slowly walked into the station. He wasn't like the others. He wore an old coat that looked too big for him, a pair of muddy boots, and a simple beanie that covered his gray hair. His beard was unshaven, and his eyes were tired, as if he had seen too much in life. He carried a worn-out leather bag, the kind that looked like it had been around for decades. To most people, he looked like a homeless man, someone they might avoid or not even see at all. Some people glanced at him and looked away. A few frowned or whispered, wondering what he was doing. But he didn't seem to care. He walked slowly toward the piano, stopped for a moment, and then sat down quietly on the wooden bench. His movements were calm, almost careful. He placed his bag beside him, removed his gloves, and stretched his fingers. No one was paying attention yet except a young girl holding her mother's hand. She pointed at the man and whispered, "Mama, is he going to play?" The mother gave a small smile, but shook her head. "I don't think so, sweetheart. That piano doesn't work anymore." The girl watched, curious. The man placed his hands gently on the keys. For a few seconds, he didn't press anything. He just sat there with his eyes closed, as if he was listening to something only he could hear. Then, very softly, he pressed a few keys. The sound echoed lightly through the air, sweet and delicate. A small, hesitant melody floated into the station. Most people didn't notice at first. They continued walking, talking, or staring at their phones, but the young girl heard it. She turned to look again. The man was playing slowly, gently, like someone telling a story. His fingers moved with a strange kind of grace, even though they looked rough and old. The music was soft, like a whisper. It didn't scream for attention. It invited you in. A man in a suit stopped mid-step. Something about the tune made him turn around. He looked at the old man on the piano, confused, as if trying to understand where this beautiful sound was coming from. Nearby, a teenager scrolling on his phone suddenly lifted his head. He didn't know why, but something in the notes pulled him away from his screen. More and more people started to notice. The music grew stronger, deeper. It was emotionally not loud or flashy, but full of feeling. The melody had a sadness to it, but also something hopeful, like someone remembering a lost love or a happy time from the past. It wasn't a song anyone could name. It didn't sound like something played on the radio. It sounded personal, like it was coming from the man's soul. A few people started recording videos on their phones. One woman wiped away a tear without realizing why. Another man sat down on a nearby bench and closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. Even the little girl sat on the floor near the piano, staring up at the man as if she was watching a magician. Still, the man kept playing. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't smile.
Ow!
His eyes remained closed, and his fingers moved like they remembered something his mind had long forgotten. It was as if the piano was the only thing in the world for him. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody guessed that the man sitting at the piano was not a poor man, not a stranger, not just someone passing time. He was Elliot Granger, a name that once meant something in the world of music and business. A billionaire, a former concert pianist. A man who had disappeared from the public eye years ago. But in that moment, he was just a man playing music. And that was all that mattered. His appearance fooled everyone. He didn't wear fancy clothes or come with security guards. There were no reporters, no attention-seeking behavior. He looked like someone who had nothing left. But his music spoke of something deeper, something that money couldn't buy. The station began to change. Where there was noise and movement, there was now silence and stillness. People stopped talking. They stopped rushing. Some even forgot about their trains. The music had taken over. It was like time had slowed down. People were listening, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. The teenager who had been filming was now holding his phone steady, live streaming the moment. Comments poured in. Who is this guy? This is beautiful. I'm crying and I don't know why. Where is this happening? Please, someone give this man a stage. Still, the man didn't stop. His hands moved faster now. Telling a more powerful story, melody rose and fell like waves in the ocean. You could feel pain, joy, and love in every note. People were wiping tears. A young couple held hands, both deeply moved. A security guard who had been watching from a distance now stood with his hat in his hands, looking humbled. Nobody said a word. They just listened, and in that moment, something magical happened. It didn't matter who people were, where they came from, or what they were doing. For a few minutes, they were all connected by music, by emotion, by the power of something real. The man played as if this was his last chance to speak, not with words, but with sound. And though no one knew the full story behind his music, they felt it, deeply. He played as if he had nothing to prove, nothing to gain, just something to share. When the last note faded into the air, the station was completely silent. People didn't clap right away. They didn't cheer. They just stood there, holding their breath, afraid to break the moment. Then slowly, as if waking from a dream, they began to applaud. Some clapped softly, others louder. Some didn't clap at all. They just cried quietly, not sure what they had just witnessed. The man opened his eyes, looked around at the crowd, and gave a small nod. Then, without saying a word, he stood up, picked up his leather bag, and began to walk away. No fanfare. No announcement. Just a quiet exit, like a ghost. And as he disappeared into the station, people were left with more questions than answers. Who was he? Why did he play? Would he come back? But one thing was certain, whoever he was, he had just given them something they would never forget. Something honest. Something pure. Something that would live in their memories long after the trains had come and gone. It wasn't just a man playing a piano. It was something more. It was a moment of truth. In a world too busy to notice, and for those who were there that morning, at the station was no longer just another date, was the day music reminded them they were human. The old man's fingers moved gently across the keys of the forgotten public piano. At first, only a few people had noticed him. But now, the melody coming from his hands was beginning to grow louder, deeper, and more powerful. It was not just music, it was emotion turned into sound. Something about it made people stop, turn their heads, and listen. The station was usually a noisy place. Trains came and went. Footsteps echoed on the cold floor, and loudspeakers made announcements about departures and delays. But as the man played, the atmosphere began to change. The usual chaos began to calm. Silence was slowly growing, not forced, but invited by the beauty of the music. The melody was not something anyone could recognize from radio or movies. It was special. It sounded like someone pouring their life into the notes. Joy, pain, love, loss. It touched people's hearts without asking for attention. The man didn't look up. His eyes were half closed, his shoulders relaxed, but his fingers moved with a grace that only came from years of practice from feeling every note deeply. A man in a business suit, who had been walking quickly to catch his train, suddenly stopped. His phone buzzed in his hand, but he didn't answer it. He turned toward the piano. Something in that music pulled at his memories. He couldn't explain it. Slowly put his phone in his pocket and just stood there, listening. A little girl, with a red jacket, sat cross-legged near the piano, watching the man with wide eyes. She didn't understand the music, but she could feel it. Her mother stood behind her, holding her shopping bags, her eyes filling with tears. She had no idea why she was crying. She just knew that the music was beautiful and real. Nearby, a teenager, with a skateboard in one hand and a phone in the other, started recording. He hadn't cared about the man at first, just another street player, he thought. But this music was different. He started live streaming. Within seconds, people online started commenting. Some asked, "Who is he?" Others simply wrote, "This is the most beautiful thing I've heard today." The piano was old, some of the keys slightly out of tune, but the man didn't seem to mind. He made it sing anyway. The sound echoed gently through the hall, not sharp but warm and full. The more he played, the more people gathered. Some sat on benches, others stood holding their bags or drinks completely still. The music had made them forget about time, appointments, and destinations. A woman in her 50s, who had been having a rough day, sat down on a suitcase. She wiped her eyes. The music reminded her of her late husband, who used to play piano when they were young. She hadn't heard anything this touching in years. In her heart, it felt like he was there with her again. Just for a moment, the teenager's live stream was gaining views quickly. More people online started recognizing the tune, even if they couldn't name it. A few music lovers commented, "This feels like a professional. It's not an ordinary street player." Someone guessed, "Could it be Elliot Granger?" Others replied, "No way. He disappeared years ago." Still, no one at the station knew the truth. No one knew that the man at the piano was indeed Elliot Granger. Once one of the world's richest men, a billionaire who had made his name in both business and music. Years ago, he had walked away from the spotlight after losing his wife in a tragic accident. Since then, he had lived quietly, helping others from the shadows. He had money, but he didn't care about it anymore. What mattered now was something deeper. In this performance, this simple, raw moment was part of that purpose. The melody changed again. Now, it became more intense. The notes grew faster, rising like a wave before crashing into sorrow. It was like the man was telling a story without words, a story about love, pain, and memories that wouldn't fade. It was like he was crying through his hands, and the piano was his voice. More people were gathering. The crowd was growing. A mother holding a baby stopped and listened. The baby stopped crying. A group of tourists from another country forgot about their photos and turned toward the music. A security guard who had been watching from a distance took off his hat, his eyes fixed on the man. No one wanted to interrupt. No one dared to speak. The music held them in place like a spell. The teenager's live stream reached thousands of views. People were sharing it across social media. "This man is a genius. I'm crying in the middle of work. I don't know who he is, but this is pure magic." Still, the old man kept playing, unaware of how many hearts he was touching around the world. The man's fingers moved with both skill and emotion. Every note seemed to mean something. His body moved gently with the rhythm, as if he was dancing. With his memories, his face showed calm, but also deep sadness. You could feel that he had lived through something painful, something he never fully healed from. The music rose again, louder this time, like a scream held inside for too long. Some people in the crowd were crying openly now. A young man in a hoodie wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He didn't care who saw. The music had broken through the walls he had built around his feelings. Then came a soft part again, quiet. Slow, like a whisper. It felt like saying goodbye. It felt like holding someone's hand for the last time. The mood in the station was heavy with emotion. People were not just listening anymore. They were feeling every moment. A woman pulled out her phone and called her sister. "You have to hear this," she said. She held the phone up toward the piano. "Just listen. You'll understand." Meanwhile, an older man with a cane sat on a bench, smiling through his tears. "This," he said quietly to the woman beside him, "is what music used to be about. No tricks, no noise, just heart." Suddenly, someone in the crowd gasped. "Tune, that's from Elliot Granger's last album, isn't it?" A man whispered to his friend. "The one dedicated to his wife?" His friend's eyes widened. "You're right, but it can't be him, can it?" More people started whispering, sharing rumors, wondering. Some even searched his name on their phones and compared photos from years ago, though he looked older, rougher. There was something in his hand, something in the way he played, that matched perfectly. But the man didn't stop. He didn't speak, kept playing, as if the piano was his way of saying everything he had kept inside for years. The melody was now reaching its final part. It was soft again, like a lullaby. The kind you play for someone you love before they sleep. The kind that stays in your heart long after it ends. And just like that, the music slowed down. The last notes floated in the air like feathers. People held their breath, hoping it wouldn't end but knowing it had to. Then, silence. No. One moved. For a long second, the entire train station was frozen in time. No announcements. No footsteps. Just stillness. And then, softly, someone began to clap. Then another, and another. Soon the whole station was filled with applause, not loud, but full of respect, full of gratitude. Some people stood, some just wiped their faces and smiled. Others whispered thank you into the air, but the old man did not bow. He did not smile. He simply opened his eyes, looked once at the crowd, and then stood up. He picked up his old leather bag, gently put on his gloves, and began to walk away. People wanted to stop him, to talk to him, to ask questions, but no one did. It felt like interrupting would ruin the magic, so they let him go. He walked quietly through the station, disappearing into the crowd like smoke in the wind. By the time the security guard tried to follow him, he was gone. The teenager looked at his phone. The live video had reached over 150,000 viewers. Comments were pouring in from all over the world. One said, "That man just reminded me why I love being alive." Another said, "I watched with my dad. We cried together." In the hours that followed, the story began to spread. Blogs and news sites picked it up. Music experts started analyzing the video. Photos of Elliot Granger from his younger days were compared with screenshots of the old man. Some believed it was him. Others said it was just a gifted stranger. But for those who had been at the station that day, it didn't matter who he was. What mattered was what he gave them without asking for money, fame, or attention. He gave them beauty, gave them emotion. He gave them a piece of himself. And long after the trains continued to run, long after the crowd had gone home, the sound of that piano still echoed in their hearts. It wasn't just a performance. It was a moment of truth, of love, of something real, and they would never forget it. Years before the day Elliot Granger played the public piano in the train station, his life had looked completely different. He wasn't a man with rough hands and an old coat. He was a man known around the world, a billionaire, a concert pianist, and a household name in both music and business. But something happened that changed everything. The pain buried deep inside him was hidden in the music he played that day. Every note he pressed on the piano told a part of the story that no one else could see. Elliot had grown up poor. His mother worked 2 jobs just to feed him. His father left when he was young. There was never enough money, but there was love. And there was music. His mother had an old, broken piano given to her by a neighbor. Elliot started playing it when he was just 4 years old. No one taught him. He just felt the music and played from the heart. By the time he was 10, he was playing like someone 3 times his age. At 15, he had his first performance in a concert hall. People called him a genius. But Elliot didn't care about being famous. He only cared about how the music made people feel. He said once in an interview, "Music is not something you hear. It's something you carry inside." In his early 20s, Elliot made millions from his performances. He started his own music company, helped young artists, and even created music apps. His wealth grew fast. In a few years, he became one of the youngest billionaires in the country. He had houses, cars, everything people dream of. But none of that mattered to him, not really. What did matter to him was Anna was a music teacher he met backstage after one of his concerts. She wasn't impressed by his fame. She cared about music, not money. That's what made Elliot fall in love with her. She understood him in a way no one else ever had. She didn't just hear his music. She felt it. And he felt her in every song he wrote after that. They married quietly, without a big show. They lived in a beautiful house, surrounded by trees, with a grand piano in the middle of the living room. Elliot often said the house wasn't a home until Anna filled it with laughter and light. Together, they dreamed of starting a school for music. A place where talented kids without money could learn and grow. Anna was more than his wife, she was his muse. Every song he composed was inspired by her smile, her kindness, the way she hummed while watering the plants. People said Elliot's music changed after meeting Anna. It became more emotional, more human. Every concert was like a love letter to her, but life can be cruel to even the kindest hearts. One rainy evening, Anna was driving home after visiting her sick mother. She called Elliot on the way, said she'd be home in 20 minutes. He was preparing a surprise dinner. She never made it. A drunk driver crashed into her car at a red light. She died instantly. Elliot's world shattered. He rushed to the hospital hoping the news was wrong. But it wasn't. The moment he saw her still body, something broke inside him, a soundless scream that would never end. He didn't cry in front of the doctors. He didn't say much, just held her hand and sat there for hours as if time had stopped. For weeks, he couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The piano in their house stood silent. He didn't touch it. Music no longer had meaning. Everything that once made sense was now empty. The house felt cold, the rooms felt bigger, and the silence became louder than anything he had ever heard. He canceled all his concerts. He stopped showing up to meetings. His company tried to keep things running, but Elliot was gone. Physically he was there, but inside he had vanished. He tried to go back to music once. He sat at the piano and placed his fingers on the keys, but nothing came out. The pain was too deep. Every note reminded him of her. He closed the lid, walked away, and didn't return for months. People in the media made guesses. Granger retires from music. Billionaire disappears after wife's death. But no one knew the full truth. He didn't want to be found. He gave up the spotlight, gave up the luxury, gave up the world. What he didn't give up, though, was his promise to Anna before she died. They had talked about creating music schools, helping poor kids who loved music but had no access to it. Elliot remembered her saying one day, "I want to sit in the back of a small classroom and hear a child play the piano for the first time. That would make me happy." That memory stayed with him, even when everything else was fading, quietly. And without putting his name on anything, Elliot began donating. He supported music programs in shelters, in poor schools, in forgotten towns. He gave money to charities and helped buy instruments for kids who had nothing. But he never showed up. He never took credit. He did it all anonymously, through a team of trusted people. He also began to travel, not in jets or fancy cars, but in simple clothes, with only a backpack or an old leather bag. Sometimes he stayed in small towns. Sometimes he slept in shelters. He met people no one cared about: runaways, recovering addicts, street performers, and he listened to their stories. Sometimes, if there was a piano nearby, he would play for them, not as a billionaire, not as a star, just as a man trying to feel again. He learned something during those travels. He learned that pain doesn't just live in big houses, it lives everywhere. He met a man who lost his daughter and found peace in painting. He met a woman who played violin on the street, so her children could eat. He met a boy with no parents who played music with spoons and empty cans. Elliot saw beauty in these people, real beauty, the kind that doesn't shine in the media. He realized that music had saved them, and slowly, music began to save him too. Little by little, he started playing again. Not on big stages, but in small places: parks, stations, under bridges, in churches. He played quietly, never giving his name. Most people thought he was a homeless man with unusual talent. He didn't correct them. He didn't want to be known anymore. He just wanted to play. Each time he sat at a piano, he felt closer to Anna. The music hurt, but it also healed. It was like she was sitting next to him again, smiling, humming, listening. That pain inside him didn't go away, but it became something else. It became part of the melody. It gave the notes a soul. Years passed like this. People who saw him play sometimes uploaded videos online. A few went viral, but no one could ever confirm who he really was. The world had forgotten Elliot Granger, but he hadn't forgotten the world, and then one day felt something in his chest, something wrong. The doctors confirmed it. A terminal illness. Not much time left. Elliot didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just sat with the news quietly as he had sat by Anna's side all those years ago. But then he made a decision. He would play one last time for the world. Not in a concert hall, not with a spotlight, but in the middle of a train station, wearing old clothes, looking like nobody. He wanted the people to feel the music without knowing who played it. No price. no fame, just music, pure and honest. That's why he chose that day, that station. That piano? He didn't expect anyone to recognize him. He didn't care if they did. He only wanted to give them something real as he played. All those memories flowed through him: his childhood, his mother Anna's laugh, the crash, the silence, the first time he played again. It was all in the music. Every part of his life, and the crowd that gathered they didn't just hear the notes. They felt his story. They cried without knowing why, because pain, when turned into beauty, doesn't need words. Elliot Granger had become a ghost in the world. But that day, through his music, he became something else. He became a reminder that behind every stranger is a story, and behind every song is a soul. As the man played the final notes on the piano, the music slowly softened and faded into silence. His fingers lifted gently from the keys, and for a brief moment, it felt like time had stopped. The station, usually filled with the noise of footsteps, voices, and announcements, was completely quiet. People didn't move. They didn't speak. It was as if the music had cast a spell on everyone who had heard it. The man slowly opened his eyes. He looked around, not with pride or ego, but with calm. His face showed no surprise at the crowd that had gathered. He simply nodded once, stood up, picked up his old leather bag, and quietly began to walk away. No one knew what to do at first. They had just heard something that touched their souls. Their hearts were full of questions, but their mouths remained closed. Then someone in the crowd began to clap. A soft clap at first, then another. Soon the entire station filled with gentle applause. It wasn't loud or wild. It was the kind of clapping that comes from deep respect. People had tears in their eyes. They were clapping not for a performance, but for something more, for honesty, for beauty, for the feeling the man had given them. But who was he? That question began to spread among the crowd. A teenage boy who had been filming the entire performance looked down at his phone. His live stream had exploded. Thousands of people were watching. Comments were pouring in from around the world. Who is this man? I've never heard anything like this. Why am I crying? It's the most beautiful thing I've seen today. Then someone in the station whispered, I think I know that melody. That was from Elliot Granger's last album, wasn't it? Another person turned, Elliot Granger? The billionaire pianist? The first man nodded. Yes. The piece he just played, it's called Anna's Lullaby. It was the last song he ever released after his wife died. Then he vanished. No one has seen him in years. People around them started checking their phones. They searched Elliot Granger's name. They pulled up old videos and photos of him playing in grand halls, dressed in suits with crowds cheering. They compared them with the man who had just played on the dusty public piano. The faces were older now, the beard longer, the eyes more tired, but the hands were the same. And the music couldn't lie. It's him, someone whispered. It really is him. News spread like fire through the station. People began to speak quietly at first, then more loudly. That was Elliot Granger. It's a billionaire pianist. He's been gone for years. He was just here. And he played for free. A music journalist who had been nearby, just passing through, heard the buzz. Her name was Claire Nolan. She had once interviewed Elliot years ago. When she heard his name, her heart skipped a beat. She rushed to the scene and asked the teenager if she could see the video. She watched it in silence, her mouth open. That's him, she said firmly. No doubt. She had seen that expression before, those eyes when he played, the way he moved his hands. Oh. She had written about his final concert, the one held just weeks after his wife passed. She remembered how broken he looked, how his music had wept instead of sung. And now, it was the same, but even deeper. Even more powerful. Claire quickly pulled out her phone and tweeted, a single message, breaking, Elliot Granger found playing. Piano at a public train station left the crowd in tears. A miracle in music. The internet went wild. The video hit over 1 million views within an hour. Comments, likes, and shares flooded in. People all over the world began talking about him again, but Elliot was gone. He had walked out of the station while everyone was still frozen in amazement. He hadn't stayed for attention. He didn't care about fame or interviews. To him, that performance had been something personal, something from the soul. He had played for the people, not for headlines. Back at the station, a homeless man named Richard stood near the piano. He had seen Elliot come there a few times over the years. They had shared meals and shelters. He had once seen him fix a broken piano in a church. Richard knew something about him, though Elliot never shared his real identity. That man. Richard said to Claire, "He's been playing in small places for years. Churches, parks, soup kitchens. Never asked for a coin, just played," he told me. "Once music is what's left when words aren't enough. I always thought he was a little mad, but now I see. He's something else." Claire took notes, her hands shaking. She knew this was more than a story. It was history. Soon, reporters began to arrive. Cameras, microphones, questions. But there was no one to interview. The man had vanished. Just like a shadow. People walked around the station, asking others what they had seen. Everyone had a different way of describing it. It was like watching someone pour their soul out through their fingers. "I've never felt music that deeply before. He looked like a poor man, but he gave us more than any superstar ever." "Could." A security guard came forward and said, "I saw him play here last winter too. No one noticed him then. Just a few people stopped, but he played the same way, like the piano was alive." As the hours passed, the mystery grew. Who else had seen him? Where did he go? Would he return? Some people refused to leave the station. They sat near the piano hoping he'd come back. One woman lit a candle. Another placed flowers on the piano. Someone stuck a small note to the bench. It read, "Thank you for reminding us how to feel." Days later, a plaque was placed next to the piano. Read, "On this spot, music became more than sound. Here, a stranger reminded us of our shared humanity. Elliot Granger, thank you." Across the world, people began to talk about the moment. Schools played the video in music classes. Professors studied the performance. Artists painted pictures of the scene. Writers wrote poems. Even children tried to learn the melody he had played, but the man himself was nowhere to be found. Some said they saw him playing in a small-town church. Others said he helped tune an old piano in a village school. Someone claimed they saw him in a shelter, helping kids learn music using spoons and buckets. No one had proof. No one got a clear photo. He had become a mystery again, but the story stayed alive. Back at the train station, something had changed. The dusty piano was no longer ignored. Every day, someone sat at it. Children, teenagers, old women, travelers. People played songs they knew or tried to create new ones. And others listened not because they expected something magical, but because they had learned that music mattered. The music could come from anyone, anywhere. Elliot's simple act had awakened something in the world. It reminded people that the most powerful things in life don't need money, or fame, or lights. They just need honesty. He didn't ask for anything. He just gave. And in giving, became more than a man. He became a memory, a melody that refused to be forgotten. And even though no one could find him again, his music was everywhere now. In homes, in hearts, in every corner of the world where someone believed in beauty, Elliot Granger had come, without warning, and he had left with the world's heart in his hands. The man who played the piano and touched so many hearts that day at the train station was gone. He had walked away quietly, leaving behind nothing but a memory. But what he left behind was far more powerful than he realized. His music played on an old dusty piano in a public space had changed lives. The people who stood in that station, and the millions who later watched the video online, would never forget what they saw and heard. By the next morning, the video of Elliot Granger's performance had reached nearly 10 million views. It was shared on every major platform: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. People were watching it during their breaks, in classrooms, on buses, and even lying in bed at night. Some watched it with tears in their eyes. Others watched in silence, their hands resting on their hearts. News channels began to run the story. Headlines appeared everywhere. Undercover billionaire leaves, crowd in tears with emotional piano performance. Was that Elliot Granger at the station? Experts say yes. The mystery musician who brought the world to silence, music critics began to study the video closely. They confirmed that the technique, the emotion, and the unique way the man used the keys matched Elliot Granger's known style perfectly. Even though his face was older and tired, the spirit in the music couldn't be denied. It had to be him. But Elliot was nowhere to be found. Private investigators tried to track him. Reporters traveled to small towns, shelters, and street music corners hoping to catch a glimpse. But he had disappeared like a dream. Still, his story was growing larger every day. More and more people came to the train station just to sit near the piano. Some would touch the keys softly, others would play simple songs. Everyone who came there knew they were standing at the spot where something special had happened, something spiritual. Some called it the miracle moment. Others called it the day music came alive. Children began learning the tune he played, now known around the world as Anna's Lullaby. Piano teachers taught it to their students, music schools added it to their beginner and intermediate classes. It was simple enough to learn, but deep enough to move a person's heart. And whenever someone played it, people would stop and listen. They didn't just hear the notes, they felt the story behind them. In the weeks that followed, something else happened, something unexpected, yet beautiful. A new music foundation was announced. It was called the Last Song Foundation. The mission was simple: provide free music education, instruments, and training to underprivileged children across the world. No fancy buildings, no big concerts, just the chance for any child, from any background, to experience music. The foundation's website had no photos of founders, no videos, and no interviews. Just a message: this is not about fame. This is not about money. This is about giving music back to the people who need it most. Let every child write their own last song before it's too late. It didn't take long before people made the connection. Donations began pouring in. Famous musicians, music teachers, and even ordinary people sent money, instruments, and support. The foundation built music rooms in orphanages, old schools, refugee camps, and remote villages. They sent volunteers with guitars, keyboards, violins, and drums to places where children had never touched an instrument in their lives. And everywhere the foundation went, they taught Anna's Lullaby first. Somewhere far away, Elliot Granger was watching. He never confirmed his connection to the foundation. He never appeared in any photos. But quietly, from the shadows, he made sure everything ran well. He kept the mission alive. The last act of his life was not to be seen, but to create something that would last. The world moved on as it always does. New trends came and went. New viral videos replaced the old. But the memory of the man at the station remained like a soft echo in people's hearts. From time to time, someone would post the video again, reminding the internet of that day. Every time it went viral all over again. 1 year later, on the exact same date, people gathered at the train station to honor him. They brought flowers, candles, and handwritten letters. Children played his song on violins, flutes, and pianos. A choir of teenagers, all from local public schools, sang a version of Anna's Lullaby with lyrics they had written themselves. He came with quiet hands. No name, no pride to show. He gave us something true, then softly let it go. As the song ended, many in the crowd wiped away tears. A woman in her 60s stood near the back. She had been there on the original day, standing near the little girl in the red jacket. Now she stood with that same girl who had grown a year older, holding a small keyboard and wearing a shy smile. "I started learning piano because of him," the girl whispered. "I want to play like that one day." The woman smiled, touched her shoulder, and said, "You already are. You're playing with your heart." By now, the station had changed. The old piano was no longer dusty or ignored. It had been polished and tuned. A clear plaque was placed above it, surrounded by gold trim. It read, "He came with only his hands. He left with our hearts. To the man who played the truth, thank you." Visitors from around the world came to see it. Some played, others just listened. Tourists took pictures, but locals often reminded them gently, this is not just a photo spot, this is a place of feeling. There were rumors every few months. Someone would say, I saw him in a village in Spain, or he played in a hospital in Brazil. But no one ever had proof. He had become a legend, half man, half myth. But in one small town in Ireland, in a quiet nursing home, there was a grand piano in the corner of a common room. The residents said a soft-spoken man came there once every week. He wore a simple coat, his hair white, his hands still strong. He never spoke about his past. But when he sat at the piano, everyone stopped to listen. He played not for applause, but for peace. Some said his name was Edward. Some called him Mr. G. No one asked more. But one nurse, who had watched him closely, swore that when he played Anna's lullaby, tears always ran down his cheek. She never told anyone else. She just sat by the door and listened. Back in the cities, the Last Song Foundation continued its work. New music teachers were trained. Old, broken instruments were repaired. Children discovered joy in sound. And every time one of them played the piano for the first time, the spirit of Elliot Granger lived again. He had vanished from the world. But his music never desert. Because some songs aren't meant for charts or trophies, some songs are meant for the soul and the man who gave the world. His last song didn't do it for fame, money, or legacy. He did it because music was all he had left, and in giving it away, he gave the world a gift they could never forget. A song without a name, a melody without a stage, a man without a mask. Just truth. Played in front of strangers, and as long as someone remembers how that music felt, Elliot Granger will never truly be gone.